You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, it looks like the Trump administration is signaling defeat with a major move as it relates to an immigration case that's ongoing right now. Can you explain what happened in court?
Brian, on the wrongful deportation front, it really feels like the dam is breaking because now in rapid succession, the Trump administration has facilitated the return of not one but two wrongfully deported men. They returned them both to the United States after, saying in court up and down 6 different ways, it's impossible for us to facilitate the return of somebody who's now in a separate country, a sovereign nation. We have no authority and no power. Well, guess what? They just did. Not once, but twice. The big one is in the Abrego Garcia case, which has been in litigation for months in federal court in Maryland before Judge Sines. And the attorneys for the Department of Justice, these third-rate lawyers, repeatedly said, yeah, Judge, can't be done. They actually, I believe, used the word impossible. Well, now they've done it. So I guess it can be done. It's not impossible. And, no misstatement, no misrepresentation by a DOJ lawyer should ever go unpunished or unaddressed. More to come on that front in the near future, I believe. But then they actually brought back a second wrongfully deported, unconstitutionally deported person. This time it was a Guatemalan that the Trump administration unlawfully, unconstitutionally deported, did not honor his constitutional due process rights of notice and opportunity to be heard. They just stuck him on a bus and they sent him to where? Not Guatemala, but Mexico. Well, guess what? A judge had previously ordered that this particular man, who was identified in the court papers and in the reporting only by his initials, OCG, this Guatemalan immigrant, may not be deported specifically to Mexico. Why? Because he fled Mexico, where he had been kidnapped and brutally assaulted. So a judge entered an order saying the Trump administration may not deport OCG to Mexico, which of course is precisely what the Trump administration did. So this judge, a federal judge up in Massachusetts, issued an order saying the Trump administration must, quote, immediately take every step available to have him returned to the U.S. And lo and behold, get ready for it, the Trump administration abided by that court order instead of fighting it, instead of delaying matters, instead of offering bullshit explanations and excuses about why we can't possibly facilitate the return of OCG. No, this man was returned. The reason it's such a big deal, Brian, is because now we know that when the Trump administration goes into court in cases like Abrego Garcia and says, oh, Judge, we can't possibly facilitate the return of anybody who is in a sovereign country. It's up to that country to return them, not us. Well, it looks like those incessant claims that were being offered in other immigration cases in court were lies, flat out lies. And I hope that this is the beginning of a trend where the Trump administration both begins to comply with court orders and begins to return to the United States the many people they have unlawfully and unconstitutionally deported.
Glenn, why do you presume the Trump administration did opt to comply after so many instances where they were just perfectly content to outright refuse any court orders?
Yeah, Brian, it's a great question, and I'm afraid we don't have a definitive answer, but let's tease it out a little bit. So this gentleman, OCG, was a Guatemalan migrant. Interestingly, he had come to the U.S. illegally previously and had been deported. Now, after he was deported, there is reporting and there are court filings that, he was brutalized in the country of Mexico. The reporting is that he was kidnapped and I'm quoting the reporting here, he was raped. So he came back into the United States, again, illegally. He'd been deported once before, but once he got here, he made his way into court. He made his case, and the judge said, yes, this man may not be deported to Mexico. And of course, the Trump administration didn't care. They violated that order. They didn't give him his due process rights, and they just sent him to Mexico. So now the Trump administration finds itself in a position where they have deported him to a place where he had been brutalized previously. And, maybe they felt like, listen, this is the kind of case where we can facilitate his return. And then you know what the Trump administration is going to do? I predict they're going to give him his due process rights. And here's what I suspect the courts will do. They will say, look, he had been deported previously. He came back here. And the only thing we ordered is that he may not be deported specifically to the country of Mexico. However, he may end up being deported to Guatemala, which is where he was from. Part of this court ruling involves not allowing the Trump administration to deport people to third countries, not their countries of origin. So if we tease it out, and I'm kind of looking into the crystal ball here, Brian, it may be that the Trump administration believes there is some upside to bringing him back, giving him his due process rights, and having a court order that, okay, he can't go to Mexico, but you can deport him to Guatemala. Wouldn't the Trump administration maybe feel vindicated, feel like that's a win if, in fact, they could deport this man? But you know what? It's a win for the Constitution, because here is something that gets lost in the mix all the time, largely courtesy of Trump's disinformation and propaganda. There are people in the United States who can be deported and should be deported. However, they can only be deported after they have enjoyed their full constitutional rights of notice that the government is going to try to deport them, and an opportunity to make their case in court represented by an attorney. There are plenty of people who deserve deportation, but the United States government, the Trump administration, has to do it right, has to do it lawfully, and has to do it constitutionally.
Glenn, you brought this point up in your first answer, but how does the Trump administration then go into court and continue to say that we have no ability to bring back someone who's out of our jurisdiction, who's out of the country and in the hands of a sovereign country like El Salvador, for example, when they've just done exactly that here?
Brian, that's the perfect question. And if only mainstream media, legacy media, corporate media would focus on that, I think the American citizens and the American population would be far better informed. Because here is what I would say to Donald Trump. I would say, you know what, sport? It looks like you can facilitate the return of people you unlawfully and unconstitutionally deported. So I would put it directly to Donald Trump and his administration. Now, do Abrego Garcia, because you've been lying and saying you can't return somebody to the U.S. who happens to be in a sovereign country, another country. Well, you were lying about it. You've now exposed yourself as liars. Now, do Abrego Garcia and the other 140 Venezuelan immigrants that you unlawfully, wrongfully deported to El Salvador.
Also, Glenn, it's worth asking, in light of new reporting, for your reaction to the fact that a number of these people were deported despite not having any gang affiliation, and yet that was the pretense under which these people were deported in the first place.
Yeah, Brian, and that's the subject of a brand new ruling in yet another immigration case, a ruling that was entered by Judge Boasberg, the Chief Judge of Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. In recent days, he issued an order saying so many of the people that the Trump administration deported to that prison in El Salvador, there was no evidence or flimsy evidence of any gang affiliation. And I'll tell you, Judge Boasberg used a very pointed word. He said, and yet those Venezuelan immigrants were sent to that prison in El Salvador and they were, quote, entombed. They were entombed. He didn't use the word detained or jailed or imprisoned. They were entombed, which connotes, for example, somebody who is buried in a building collapse. Right. They are entombed. So, Judge Boasberg said, yeah, you're going to give all 140 of them their full constitutional due process rights, and you have 1 week to come back to me and tell me how you will accomplish that.
And so, Glenn, in light of this new unprecedented move by the Trump administration re-importing somebody who was wrongfully exiled to another country, what can we expect to see in these subsequent cases in terms of what the immigrants' attorneys are going to do?
I think the playing field has shifted. It's now clear that the Trump administration can facilitate the return to the United States of people they unlawfully deported. So I think gone is that argument that they've been making to federal judges in multiple immigration cases. So what I would hope to see, Brian, I'm not going to go so far as to say I expect to see it, but now that we know Donald Trump's administration can comply with court orders and can facilitate the return of these folks to the U.S., I am hopeful that they will begin doing precisely that, and they begin complying with the Constitution, which is all that the American people are asking and all that the immigrants that the Trump administration is trying to move against deserve.
And finally, let's finish off with this. What are next steps, at least as it relates to this case in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question because next steps are now OCG. We only have the initials of the wrongfully deported and ultimately returned Guatemalan migrant. He will now get to make his case in court about why he shouldn't be deported at all. He may lose that argument.
Right.
But
at least he gets due process, which is, at the end of the day, what this entire argument in all of these different cases is regarding.
He gets his due process, and his attorney may be even more focused on not wanting his client deported where? To Mexico, where he was viciously victimized previously. And think about it. I would like to think even the Trump administration, any administration, doesn't want to be part of the machinery that mindlessly, never mind lawlessly, deports people to a country where they can be expected to be victimized, assaulted, or worse.
Yeah. Well, we will, of course, stay on top of this case and the other cases that are obviously similar and deal with wrongly deported migrants, wrongly deported immigrants, and what the implications of this case is on those subsequent cases. So for those who are watching right now, if you'd like to follow along with this stuff and all legal news, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.